The fourth level. Iran rejected the 15-point plan on Wednesday. State TV. Formal statement. Araghchi looked into the camera and said his government does not plan on any negotiations. Nobody who matters was watching. Because while Iran's foreign minister performed for domestic television, for foreign ministers gathered before dawn in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey, Pakistan, no UK, no EU, no NATO. The negotiating architecture for what comes after this regime was already in the room before Iran finished saying no. Read that again. The countries at that table are not the ones you'd invite to a ceasefire. They're the ones you'd invite to a transition. And buried in the reporting this week, a detail that hasn't been connected yet. Egyptian intelligence opened a direct channel to the IRGC, not through diplomats, through the military wing itself. Because Israel killed Ali Larijani, the one Iranian official the West considered a viable negotiating partner. So Egypt went around the political layer entirely and talked to the people who actually control the country's military infrastructure. That's the third level. The institutional layer underneath the regime. Ground sources in Iraq say Trump isn't even working with the third level. He's working with a fourth. The people who will run Iran's next government. A new generation. The deal isn't being negotiated with this regime. It's being assembled without them. We have a deal with Iranian people who are going to take over. That's from CBI watchers on the ground in Baghdad. Not a prediction. A report. They say it plain. The remaining regime elements, the ones going on state TV to demand reparations and troop withdrawals, are talking to themselves. Their 5 conditions are a press release from a government that no longer exists in the room where decisions get made. Here's what confirms it. The rejection as strategy. Yesterday, the 15-point plan was on the table. Today, it's been rejected, and the response proves it was never meant for this regime. The plan asked for permanent nuclear dismantlement, Hormuz guarantees, and proxy force dissolution. Iran countered with reparations, troop withdrawal, and sovereignty over Hormuz. 2 documents that will never meet. And that's the point. The rejection creates the public record. When the transition comes, the world has the receipts showing this government was offered terms and chose defiance. The dawn meeting in Riyadh is the tell. You don't send 4 foreign ministers to Saudi Arabia at 4 a.m. to mourn a failed ceasefire. You do it to coordinate what replaces the regime that said no. What's left of Iran's hand? CENTCOM released an operational update Tuesday. Admiral Cooper's assessment. Not a single Iranian ship is underway in the Arabian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, or the Gulf of Oman. 0. Over 140 Iranian vessels damaged or destroyed. 9,000 combat flights. The navy that gave Iran its leverage for 45 years is gone. Iran's response? Threatened to open a new front at Bab el-Mandeb. The Houthis declared Hour Zero for a naval blockade of the Red Sea. That's not escalation. That's a regime reaching for the only card it has left after the first 5 were shredded. Jordan expelled Iran's diplomats this week. 119 missiles and 59 drones fired at Jordanian territory. Saudi Arabia already expelled theirs. Iran attacked Kuwait International Airport. Started a fire. These are not the actions of a government negotiating from strength. These are the convulsions of a system that knows the architecture being built in Riyadh doesn't include them. Meanwhile, Mojtaba Khamenei's latest proof of life was an undated seminary video and a handwriting sample. The supreme leader of Iran is proving he exists using calligraphy. The White House said talks are ongoing. Iran said they aren't. Both are telling the truth, just about different levels. The signal nobody explained. At 9:15 p.m. Wednesday, the official White House account posted a 4-second video to X and Instagram. Camera pointed at the floor. A female voice. It's launching soon, right? A partial yes. Text overlay. Sound on. 45 minutes later, a second clip. Black static. Phone notification sounds. An American flag at the 3-second mark. No caption. No context. No explanation. The first video hit 1.4 million views before the White House deleted it 90 minutes after posting. No official statement. No clarification. No, it was an accident. This was posted during an act of war, hours after Iran rejected the ceasefire terms. while 82nd Airborne staging continues near the strait, while a supreme leader communicates through calligraphy. Could be nothing. Could be a staffer's mistake. But the White House has a comms team that controls every pixel on those accounts. And Jack Posobiec replied with 4 words, "Activation signal received." You tell me what's launching. Inside Iraq, ground sources report militia activity declining daily. Missiles and drones still hitting Baghdad and the north, but the pattern CBI watchers flagged weeks ago is confirmed. Less every day. The coordination framework still refuses to name a prime minister candidate. Playing for time. Using the war as leverage to push Maliki. It won't work. Ground sources say Sadani will serve a second term. The U.S. repeats it to Iraq daily. Don't even think about Maliki. Iraq's Ministry of Transport confirmed over 2,000 trips through the TIR international transit system since Asakuta went live mid-last year. Trucks crossing borders without interruption. Customs digitized. Revenue captured. Kurdistan revenues dropped 70% under the new system. Not because trade collapsed. Because Asakuta is catching what the old system never counted. Oil and finance ministers have been summoned to parliament to explain how they'll manage limited oil deliveries during the conflict. Sadani's circle believes this will be short-lived. Bond market sources say things are moving. When there's something concrete, you'll hear it here. Not before. Banking contacts report the Clarity Act update hit a nerve. Banks blinked. Senators blinked with them. Fear from legacy banking over new digital asset infrastructure driving legislative changes. And this week, Iraq's gold reserves were confirmed at 170.85 tons. Value up 64% year over year. Egypt. The country whose intelligence services just opened a direct channel to the IRGC, bypassing Iran's government entirely. The Wall Street Journal reported Egyptian intelligence contacted the Revolutionary Guard military wing directly, proposing a 5-day suspension of strikes on the Arabian Peninsula in exchange for the U.S. and Israel pausing attacks on Iranian energy infrastructure. Half of Iran's own government can't talk to the IRGC. Egypt went straight to the people who actually control the military. That's not diplomacy. That's transition architecture. Pakistan. The country with the only direct line to Iran's military command that Washington trusts. U.S. Envoy Witkoff has a direct connection to Pakistan's Army Chief, Field Marshal Asim Munir. Pakistan received and delivered the 15-point plan to Tehran. Prime Minister Sharif publicly offered to host talks. Saudi Crown Prince MBS personally discussed Pakistan's mediation role with Sharif. These aren't peacekeepers. These are the countries that built the regional architecture that kept Iraq contained for decades. Oil quotas, pipeline leverage, political management, military back channels. And they're redesigning that architecture at 4 a.m. in Riyadh. Without Iran, without Europe, without the UN. Now zoom out. Part 3 documented the capitulation tour. Trump's first foreign trip in 2017 wasn't to Canada or a NATO ally. It was Riyadh. He was greeted with the Arda, the traditional sword dance, the highest honor in Saudi culture, reserved for kings and allies before battle. $110 billion arms deal signed. The glowing orb ceremony with King Salman and Egypt's Sisi. 3 leaders. 3 hands on one globe. Iran's own deputy chief of staff tweeted afterward. What is happening is the preliminary result of the sword dance. He was right. He just didn't know how right. May 2025. Trump returns to Riyadh as his first trip of the second term. Same country. Same first stop. This time, $600 billion in Saudi investment over 4 years. $142 billion defense deal. MBS visits Washington 6 months later and gets designated a major non-NATO ally. F-35s on the table. The relationship that started with a sword dance became the deepest U.S.-Saudi strategic partnership in history. The sword dance in 2017 was the alliance. The $600 billion in 2025 was the investment. The war in 2026 is the execution. And the Dawn meeting in Riyadh this week is the endgame. Part 1 laid out the 118-year cycle. Part 2 showed you the $17.7 billion paper trail, the Western banks that ran Iran's money through Iraq's system while blocking every reform. Part 3 identified the capitulation tour, the executive orders, and the declaration nobody reported. Every blocking mechanism from Part 2 is being physically destroyed right now. The bank networks, the sanctions evasion corridors, the political protection layers, the Iranian-funded militia system that kept Maliki in power for 17 years. All of it. And the countries that enabled that containment architecture for decades? They're in Riyadh, drawing the new map. The same room. The same city where Trump danced with swords 9 years ago. Iraq finished positioning in 2025. The bonds. The gold. The corridors. The customs system. The legislation. Every prerequisite for what comes next was completed before the first bomb fell. I could be reading this wrong. Maybe the dawn meeting was diplomatic theater. Maybe the fourth level is just a rumor that sounds good. But the infrastructure doesn't lie. Countries don't spend $40.8 billion positioning for something they don't expect to happen. And you don't dance the Ardo with someone you aren't going to war alongside. Still watching what comes out of that Riyadh room. Closely.